Dropbear and Panda.
Welcome to Season 1,
Episode 19,
Dropbear and Panda Save
The World.
Now, Jennifer sounds a little bit weird, a little bit like a robot, but that's because
What are you talking about? No?
Yeah, it was pretty good. That's because she is very far away from me, and I'm very far away from her. She's in Calgary. I'm on Vancouver Island. I've got all the recording stuff because I was out here on business and did another podcast earlier.
Business.
Yeah, business. And we're catching up. So Dropbear and Panda Save the World, episode 19, if you can believe it, legal in BC.
What?
Yeah, last week we were legal in Alberta.
And Ontario. We're now legal in Ontario as well.
Holy shit.
I know. It's amazing.
Yeah. So, Jennifer's, what's the weather like there in Calgary? Was it nice today?
Oh, yeah. It's a good, 15 degrees today.
Oh, nice.
Very sunny.
Yeah.
Yesterday was a cold 16.
Oh. It was...
you know what that means.
Yeah. Yeah. It was raining here today, pretty much all day, drizzly and gray.
Oh.
Yeah.
I still don't feel bad for you, though, because you have an ocean to frolic around.
Yeah, that's true. I have not even seen the... Oh, no, I saw the ocean yesterday. I was downtown for a little bit.
Yes, I actually want to hear about your adventures with the cab companies.
Okay. Yeah, so it's different. So in Calgary, if you want to grab a cab, because we live in Kensington, it's pretty central. And you can literally just walk for 10 seconds. A cab will come by, you flag it down, you get in the cab, and off you go.
Uh-huh.
I was downtown Victoria proper yesterday, and I was trying to get a cab. And so I'd see a cab, and I'd put up my hand, and it just kept driving past me. And so this happened, there's at least 10, 12 cabs that would not pick me up. And I'm like, well, that's weird. I was getting really frustrated, actually. What kind of city is this that you can't get a cab? Because, when we were in New York, I've got a picture of you just standing out. You took a step on the street, put up your hand, and bam, there's a cab right there.
Oh, yeah. Well, in New York, that's easy to do.
Yeah. So, Victoria is not a small town. It's a city. It's a capital city at that. And I'll be damned if I could get a cab. And it turns out that they're not allowed to stop on the street and pick you up.
Is it because you guys will murder people or what?
I really don't know, but...
Do they not have enough cab drivers to justify having cabs just driving randomly around, maybe?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I honestly haven't looked into it other than, I called, I texted my youngest son and said, why the hell aren't cabs picking me up? He goes, you have to call a cab here. It's not Calgary, Dad. And I'm like...
Yeah, but you know what, though? That's weird. That is really freaking weird.
I thought it was weird.
Super weird.
Yeah. Anyway, so he texted me a cab number. I called a cab, and within 2 minutes, cab shows up. And I was like, okay. So, all right. So just different rules, different cities, different rules. So now, listeners, if you go to Victoria, don't flag down a cab because they won't pick you up.
Well, you can flag all the cabs you want. They just stop you.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Knock yourself out.
Yeah. One will just waste your time more than the other.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you finally got a cab in that crazy metropolis of Victoria.
Yeah, it's nuts. Absolutely
You
nuts.
got some exercise, though.
Yeah, lots of walking.
Yeah.
I was walking. Yeah.
So, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
What does Siam, Switzerland, Graz, Austria, Sapporo, Japan, and Erzurum, Turkey all have in common?
I have no idea.
They have all taken out their hats that were in the ring for the 2026 Olympics.
What?
Yep.
So who's left?
Stockholm, Sweden.
Mm-hmm.
Milan Cortina d'Ampezzo, Italy.
Oh, I'd go there.
And this very unknown city that we keep talking about called Calgary.
So,
in Alberta, Canada.
Why did all those other cities take out their bid?
Well, Well, they've dropped out anywhere between the 10th of June to October 2018. And I'm going to tell you why in 2 seconds here.
Yeah.
Cities have been participating in the dialogue stage since its launch in September 2017. Calgary, Sapporo, Stockholm, and Sion took part in the Pyeongchang 2018 Observer Program. However, Switzerland subsequently withdrew from the bidding process in June, Austria in July, Japan in September, and Turkey in October. Now, I think some of them were because it was going to be too expensive. Here we go. Okay, so Turkey withdrew October 2018. This is the first time they've tried for the Winter Olympics. Due to lack of transport, telecommunications, and airports. So that's why Turkey withdrew.
I didn't even think Turkey had a lot of snow, but it shows you what I know about the world.
Well, apparently they've tried for Summer Olympics fairly often. It might be sort of like Canada or Japan, where they can do both easily. Sapporo withdrew in favor of bidding for 2030.
Sorry, who did?
Sapporo, Japan.
Yeah.
They withdrew, but they're going to put their hat in the ring for 2030.
Nice. Great beer, by the way, if you like light Japanese beer.
Yeah. So they have a problem with venues.
Yeah.
Graz, Austria withdrew in July. They failed the public vote.
Oh, and we've got one of those coming up, don't we?
Yeah. And then Sion, Switzerland withdrew. There was a referendum and people didn't want it. They rejected our proposal to fund the 2026 Winter Games. The 53.96% of voters refused to pledge financial support.
Wow.
So November 13th, we actually have the same kind of thing happening in Calgary where we get to vote on whether or not we want to help fund this thing.
Yeah. And I know that, like, we both know somebody who's on the, whatever it's called, the No Party.
Yes. The No Calgary.
Yeah, No Calgary. Go ahead.
What? Okay, Olympics are set to cost $5.23 billion. That's with a B.
Yeah.
They said this just on Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
The Olympic and Paralympic Winter Games in Calgary would cost about $5.23 billion. And a lot of that is going to be taxpayers' money. How they do that, I guess, is like upping taxes, that kind of thing, which a lot of people are not obviously interested in doing. Calgary's just still trying to get over a huge recession where we had tons of people getting laid off. The oil patch and the oil industry is floundering right now. So it's really tough for people who have been, in such dire financial straits to want to pay for the Olympic Games in 2026.
Yeah, and I get that. We were, back in '88 when we had the Olympics. Not an entirely different scenario. We had come out of a recession.
Right.
I don't know when they started bidding on the 1988 games. And if they started the bidding process in 1980, that would have been the worst time ever to think about doing the Olympics.
Right. Or they said yes and then went, oh shit, we shouldn't have said yes.
Yeah. So it's interesting. And so I worked during the 1988 Olympics in Calgary. I had a bunch of jobs. I was with food services. I was also at the ski hills. I shoveled out the 90-meter ski run when the snow techs, pointed the snow guns the wrong direction. But I mean, that was, Eddie the Eagle days, and it was a really good time. As a bartender at the university, we had the figure skaters in there for it wasn't just figure skaters, but man, the figure skaters could drink. Holy moly.
I would too if I I had to skate around with sequins on all day.
Yeah, but they it was a lot of fun, and certainly the city was totally into it, and it made it a very successful thing.
Right.
So if
we still use this stuff today too.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like we use the Olympic Oval, we use the ski jumps, which I think are actually, I heard, are being torn down for new ones possibly. But we do a lot of training for our Nordic teams here in Calgary. So
yeah, that's right. And Canmore Nordic Center is still a thing. Last I checked, the Olympic Oval is still being used to train speed skaters and all sorts of other stuff. So yeah, we certainly got a lot of use out of it, and there's some stuff that can be recycled, I'm sure, and there's also stuff that needs to be updated. Yeah.
So, of the estimated $5.2 billion that the Calgary 2026 bid corporation estimates it would cost to host the game, the city, province, and Canadian government have been asked for a combined public investment of $3 billion. While the 2010 Winter Olympic Games in Vancouver and Whistler, BC, Canada, cost roughly $4 billion to run, the BC government spending on a rail line to the airport and convention center completed in time for those games brought the total to $7.7 billion.
Wow.
It's not cheap.
No, but...
And I guess people are trying to figure out whether, the glory of an Olympics in a number of years is better than the hardships that might happen to get there.
So, and I know this is like super simple, stupid math, but in Calgary, there's, 1.5 million people. Yeah, right. And I'm making numbers up a little bit, but
that's what we do.
I would be happy to donate $100 to the Calgary Olympic Fund. And if 1 million people from the city of Calgary donated $100, that is $1 billion. Now,
I'm going to throw this back at you.
Yeah.
We are highly taxed. When we get too much snow in Calgary, the city will refuse to put in some extra money to make sure that we can get to our bus stops and get our cars dug out of, giant mounds of snow, etc. We've got potholes that haven't been fixed in years. So how could they justify 2026 Olympics when there are still people out of work and they won't even put $20,000 for an extra snowplow?
Right. Well, and
this is my problem.
Right. And so here's the thing. Here's the thing. So my solution was, what I said is, if me and 1 million other people put in $100, that's $1 billion.
Yeah.
So that's me out of my pocket. I would happily do that. It is a significant amount of money, but it's not a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
And I would certainly, I support it. I think that's something that I would put $100 towards, for example. It doesn't really have anything. It actually has nothing to do with snowplows. That's the city's thing to deal with, and I don't pretend to understand the complexities of what happens when it snows and how much extra they spend on extra plows to make sure the major thoroughfares are dealt with.
Well, I'm just using that as an example. I'm not saying that.
I know.
I'm just saying there's a lot of things that we could spend money on that the city refuses to do. But
yeah, I get it. I think I'm squarely in the camp. I'm squarely in the camp that, getting exposure for the city is going to have long-term financial benefits globally. That's one side of it. The other side of it is I firmly believe also that the IOC certainly used to be patently evil. Whether they still are today, I don't know. I haven't really looked into the things that they did, but they were at one point a lot like FIFA. In their.
Oh, I was going to ask that actually.
Yeah, in their dealings, it always is very, IOC sided or FIFA sided. Seems like a bit of a a cartel, where they make sure they make their money, and the host cities don't always make the money back, and are sometimes left with shit that they can't do anything with.
Now, apparently, the IOC is a non-profit organization. As soon as they get money, they dole it back out. So says someone from the IOC.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And again, we're not reporters. Not reporters.
We're not reporters. Very true.
And CODA, I think, so that was the Calgary Olympic Development Association. There was all sorts of weird things about that apparently back in 1988, but again, I'm no investigative journalist. I'm not a reporter. I worked it. I had fun. The athletes certainly had fun. It's always great to get a bunch of people from around the world to go and compete and do things in a healthy, positive way. And if you can leverage that for a little bit of good press for the city and where you're at in the world, I'd say that's a good thing. I've got no issue with that whatsoever.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting vote on the 13th of November. I think there's pre-voting on the 8th and 9th or something. But,
okay, yeah, because we're going to do our own referendum plebiscite thingy.
Yeah. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, well, and I like the fact that you can vote. Yeah. But get out and vote. They might even
ignore us. Who knows? Yeah. They might be like, I don't care. We're going to do it anyway, or not do it anyway. Who knows?
Yeah, could very well be.
I certainly don't. I do have a comment before you go.
Yeah.
I am very late to the party, but I have started listening to this podcast called Lore.
Oh, yeah, Lore.
Lore, Lore. And every episode is about, 15 to 25 minutes long. And he talks about, Aaron Mahnke talks about, something from folklore that is actually based on, true to life tellings, right? Which makes it even creepier because basically, true stories are even scarier than fake ones, right?
Right.
So I'm quite obsessed about it because it takes very little time to listen to an episode. So I get home, I take the dishes out of the dishwasher, put them away. I'm listening to Lore. I go to bed. I listen to an episode or two. And because we're in a new house, I'm not used to all the sounds of this new house yet. And going to bed after listening to a story about how the dead are rising or creepy ghost stories that have actually sort of happened but not happened by myself in a house that makes strange noises that I've never heard before is not the greatest thing to do.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. And I mean, the stories themselves aren't super scary, but when you add a whole bunch of other things to the mix, you're like, oh my gosh, and then Newton will jump on the bed and scare the shit out of me, so that's super.
Is that why I got the message earlier? I miss you.
Newton's trying to kill me. Please come home and battle all the zombies in the backyard. Maybe. I don't know. You don't know.
Whatever. I don't know.
Yeah. Just thought I'd let you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, as you know, weed is now legal in Canada. We talked about that last week. And there's a place in Victoria called Terp City.
Terp City?
Terp City, yeah. Terp City. It's short for terpenes, which I was not aware that these were a thing. And terpenes are basically a bunch of different elements found in weed. So different terpenes do different things. So if you're having a hard time sleeping, this certain terpene will help with that. If you have chronic pain, this certain terpene will do that. There's a huge science about it. And I was super curious. So I went into this weed shop in Victoria today and just started asking questions because how cool is it that you can walk in and, talk weed?
Yeah,
openly.
No kidding.
Yeah. So yeah, this guy behind the counter, and I'm trying to remember. It was it was another place, Terp City. You can't buy weed in Terp City. You have to get it from a dispensary, but you can bring your own weed in, and that's it. Yeah. Anyway, so it is pretty rad. You can walk in. You have to prove that you're above the age of 18 or 19, I guess.
Yeah.
And then you can go up and talk with a weed wizard.
They all look like Gandalf because That would be amazing.
No, he didn't look like Gandalf at all. But he, like any question you want, I'm just like, well, what if I've got this and this and this? He's just like, oh, okay, well, you can use, you definitely want to go with the indica, because you don't want to get too spacey and freaked out, but you want to have this terpene, and this terpene. And I was like, man, like we live in this, holy Newton.
I know, I'm sorry. I won't let him outside in the dark.
Yeah, don't. But anyway, like, so I got a total education from this weed wizard, and it kind of cracked me up that we're living in this world right now. And I'm not bringing it back to boost our numbers talking about marijuana, but oh my God, I love living. I love living in this future because it's like everything's out in the open, and what a cool conversation to have.
Yeah, no kidding. So funnily enough, when you said TERP, I was like, so TERP, T-U-R-P, is a medical procedure. T-E-R-P is also an artificial dwelling mound found on the North European plain that has been created to provide safe ground during storm surges, high tides, and sea or river flooding.
Wow.
So when you're like TERP, I was like, that's not what... Oh, okay, cool. Weed. Super neat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I know some people who have chronic pain who have never tried marijuana, and I really think they should. Yeah. I think it'd be fantastic for them to try something like that. It's hard to get over the stigma, right, of being told that something is illegal and wrong and bad and the devil's lettuce for your entire life, right? And then suddenly being like, oh, you mean I can smoke some of this and my fibromyalgia will go away? That's crazy.
Yeah, well, I think, yeah, it's a weird world that we're living in. And I was thinking, if I bought a bunch of weed here, like if I bought a couple grams of weed from this weed shop, I'm like, oh my God, how can I get it back to Calgary? And then I'm like, shit, I can actually just put it in my bag and fly.
Yeah. As long as you stay in Canada, you can fly with it. Yeah. I still wouldn't necessarily recommend it, only because people are still being dicks about it and they're being very cautious.
I don't know, man. Like I like it's a weird thing to wrap my brain around that this is the future that we're living in. Yeah. And honestly, having gone to this shop, this dispensary, and the education that's available, like I'm honestly blown away. Like I just, man, where was this like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago? Why has this been criminalized for so long when you can have an open conversation and learn so much? Yeah. So anyway,
it's not like alcohol makes you spacey and drunk, and weed can definitely do that as well, obviously. But alcohol doesn't, cure migraine pain. It'll give them to you, but it won't cure it, right? I mean, there's so many things that weed is great for. It's certainly not for me, but heck, man, like if you want to use it, have at her. Yeah, it won't kill you like alcohol will, right?
Yeah, well, and I love the fact that you can make shit out of hemp, and just what an amazing plant it is. Like I'm blown away constantly. Anyway, so that's the last thing I'm going to say on the subject for this week. But I went to BC and I asked some questions from a weed wizard, and I was not disappointed.
I would have been disappointed that he didn't look like Gandalf, though. So.
Yeah, no, he was like this. I don't know. Take this for what it is. He was like a super wise Asian guy.
Nice.
Yeah, he didn't have one of those cool like long mustaches or beards, though. He didn't like groom his beard, his long glorious beard in front of me.
Oh, you're going there, are you?
Well, I'm just saying, like, Anyway, way to go, Canada. I'm glad this is happening. It's long overdue, and I'm getting a kick out of it. I think it's really neat to blow the lid off this thing. Get it? A lid? Okay, that's an old reference. Never mind.
I have no idea what you're talking about, but now you're into horticulture, so that's super.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway.
All right. Well, I think that's enough, because it's very hard to have this conversation when I can't see you.
Yeah. Well, and we tried doing FaceTime, and that was just terrible.
Yeah, and there's a bit of a delay and everything, so this might actually sound absolutely terrible. You know, who knows?
Yeah, we don't know. So how are you going to save the world this week, Panda?
Oh man, you know, I don't even know. I really don't know. I am glad that in Calgary I can wave a cab down.
Yeah.
I will continue being my regular amazing self.
That's fair.
And I think that's all I got right now. Because I'm going to defend the house from the dark arts.
Oh, good.
From the zombies and the ghosts that are all around us, apparently.
All right, that's fair. You
and changelings and imps and gnomes and oh my gosh, you have no idea. We're surrounded.
Okay, well, so maybe dial into some more lore before you go to bed.
I'm gonna die. How are you gonna save the world?
I am going to. I'm going to bring my knowledge back from Vancouver Island and share it with the world.
From the wise weed wizard.
That's right, because I feel that
that's 10 times fast.
Right, wise weed wizard. Right, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm bringing information back from a faraway land.
Faraway land. Well, it is pretty different from us.
Oh,
that's true.
So different, because I could not get a cab. But I can get weed, but not a cab.
That is not right. Victoria, I want to live in you, but you're making it difficult. Anyways, I am Panda.
I'm Dropbear.
And this has been...
Dropbear and Panda.
Save the world.
Episode 19, Legal in BC. We're not reporting. It's Dropbear and Panda, yeah. It's Dropbear and Panda, yeah. Dropbear and Panda, coming at you, Panda. Coming at you like a locomotive on a motherfucking bender. Yeah, I my culture, now my chap, follow me. Yeah, with Michael Doggies, yeah, you be checking on the flow, yo. Checking flow, but you was quick, you can't pick my medical ranges, angles, tangles. You get tangled, twisted side effects, child should be. Can't compete with the owls that devour. Yeah, with the owls that devour, yeah. Yeah, it's a Dropbear and Panda, coming at you right now. Dropbear and Panda, coming at you right now. Dropbear and Panda, coming at you right now. It's like a locomotive filled with autonomous chopper. Dropbear and Panda, coming at you right now. It's like a locomotive filled with autonomous chopper.
Dropbear and Panda.